And you are welcome along to the Huddle Breakdown. We are recording on transfer deadline day. We are being contrarians, as we are apt to do, as everyone else waits to do their podcast until they know what's going on when the window slams shut. Alan and I said, F it. We are just going to wing it without knowing what's going to happen. So we were recording as of a little bit before 6:30 p.m. UK time on Monday. So keep that in mind as we progress after we break down that glorious spectacle of world-class football in the Glasgow Derby from Sunday. Alan, are you ready to break down what was one of the greatest spectacles in the history of the sport?
Yeah, full stop after breakdown was all that was needed there. Yeah.
Break down so much that was unbreakable. So yeah, let's just get right into the game. I guess the first thing would be, before we get into the nitty gritty of the performance and kind of the nuances, it was a draw at Ibrox, so that's not a happy clapper thing to say. Like, in the grand scheme of things, if you isolate it from the fact that it's almost a year to the day. Actually, I think it is a year to the day from today that we beat them 3-0 last season. Last time we beat them in a 90-minute match. But in the arc of a league campaign, drawing one of the games at Ibrox shouldn't be the world coming to an end. So why does it feel that way, Alan? What's going on?
Yeah, listen, that's right. I think actually it's a reasonable result, right? It's not a terrible outcome. But it's just the manner of the performance again. Which again, we know sometimes in a league campaign you have to fight scratch for games. Games don't go your way, things go against you. You got to dig in, all that sort of stuff, and not every win is pretty. Not everything goes your way. Sometimes you escape with draws when perhaps you deserved less, and all those sort of things are normal parts of a league campaign. But I think for this game, it's really none of those scenarios in my mind applied. This was really the manifestation of issues in personnel, in tactics, in setup that have plainly been building up for quite a long time. And we will get into the whole transfer window stuff, because it all, as much as these idiots on Sky Sport try to compartmentalize all of those things into discrete conversations, they're all related. So it was an abysmal spectacle of a game, but it was the nature of how Celtic played that's their primary concern. That can't file under any of those. Well, we dug in and got a tough away point. That was an abject display that highlighted many of the same issues that we've seen home and away against Kairat Almaty, and also in other key games like the Scottish Cup final and in derby matches last season, where the Rodgers approach gets stressed in that way. I don't even think it was particularly down to the selection. I don't think we could have picked
didn't have too many options.
Team. Exactly. So maybe we'll get into that. But that's my kind of start for 10. But I've got a lot more to say. But listen, you tell me what you thought.
Well,
at a high level.
My first question is, I want to find out how the black magic that Rangers have been deploying in Europe for all these years, they redirected it somehow to get Barry Ferguson to possess Russell Martin's body for that hour and a half. I mean, that the shift in tactics from them, I thought, was notable. Probably a bit of a surprise. Again, I was surprised by it. I don't know whether to credit him. I mean, we've been building him up as an evangelist. That we talked to Patrick in the preview on Thursday last week. We recorded it. So I thought that was a surprise. So they basically set up to nullify us, which they did. I mean, they sure as hell didn't really accomplish anything going forward about it. But yeah, I just thought it was almost, they seemed to be intentionally trying to negate and nullify the game. And then we just had no plan to combat that, which again, Yeah, I joked. I put out a tweet. Are we all Karat Almaty now? It's like that's basically they played kind of like Karat did, and just really setting up to neutralize anything for us. And we were just totally impotent. I mean, it was just mind-numbingly bad. All of the warts and issue. I put in the Huddle Breakdown chat. It was like all of our problems and build-up last season manifesting again. McGregor getting man marked out of the game. Engels and Hitate getting man marked and not really being able to shake loose from that. Only we didn't have any of the speed in the front three to get in behind. So it was like, because we did pull them out. And if you kind of look at the average line of engagement of the game, I mean, they were out a little bit. There was some room in behind at times, but we just don't have the people to, as Rodgers said. I mean, there just isn't the players to accomplish that. So yeah, I dreadful. I don't know where we're going from here. That's the most kind of alarming part of this. It's I don't know what the game plan could be. We'll get into the transfer window, as you said, but it's just confusion. There was confusion going into the game. Talked about that last week. We talked about it being a mess, either a 7-7 draw or a 0-0 draw would be plausible, and it just absolutely finished in a complete mess, in just a diabolical way, in an eyesore. But well, let's get into some of that specifics then on what you noted on that chessboard as far as the kind of relative tactics of the two teams, and how how you saw it kind of play out. So how did you think they set up that was different than what you expected?
Yeah, so listen, they did, right, and it was kind of like Barry Ferguson netball. It was, from the very early moments, Jack Butland was just shelling the ball forward. Essentially, it was that, as you say, that kind of Kairat game plan of get the ball, negate Celtic's high press, get the ball over the top of it as quickly as possible, and then essentially you're playing for second ball. You're playing for the knockdowns. You're playing for the scrimmage in the middle of the pitch, and hopefully the ball bounces your way, and then you can hopefully break because you've beaten Celtic's initial press, and then you play for free kicks and throws. James Tavernier appears to have gone to Thomas Gronemark over the summer, as well as Kieran. Kieran Tierney must have got a 2-for-1 deal on how to throw the ball an enormously long way, because he did a great job in terms of that. I mean, isn't it hilarious, by the way? Isn't it hilarious that all these millions of players that they've bought, that James Tavernier is still their most creative player for all the hate that they give him, for all they tried and chase him out of the club and how they blame him for this, that, and everything else. He's still their most creative player. Even when you play netball, because his long throws are so good. So that was it, and that was the game plan. Really, it was keep the ball. It was exactly the same as Barry Ferguson's netball. It was keep the ball away from our the Rangers defenders, and just get it as forward as quickly as possible, and then use Celtic's relative lack of height to defend cross balls, and free kicks and throw-ins. That was essentially it. They did have little moments when they did start messing about at the back and passing it to and forth, and the crowd got really angry, and then kind of Scotland would just bang it forward again. So it was a surprise. I mean, you and Patrick convinced me on Thursday that there was no way he was going to change what he was doing, because that would be basically to lose face massively. If he's going to fail at this job, he's going to fail on his own terms, doing his own thing. And I think fair play to him. He at least swallowed his pride and played wee man football, right? That's how we teams play against Celtic, and that's not a criticism. It's right, and he was humble enough to play that way. Now, before fans of the Delaware Rangers get all excited and think, oh, that was some kind of, we'll take positives from this. This was some kind of moral victory. I almost could feel the moral victory cup being held aloft by Martin in the post match. This is one of the most abject, flat, I mean, like, listen, I don't even want to get into the game because we've seen the game. We've seen that match before, right? We saw it twice to get knocked out of the Champions League, and therefore I don't see a lot of benefit in talking about that. In all honesty, this is this team is at the end of a cycle. It's clearly at the end of a cycle. Everybody's flat. There doesn't appear to be any energy. There's no fire in the bellies. This is an aging team as well. A lot of people misunderstood what I said on Thursday when I talked about, we should have sold Carter Vickers, Hatate, Maeda, to name three. They completely misunderstood what I was saying. What I was saying was, if in a club where squad management is front foot and planned,
Functional, you mean?
yeah,
Actually done.
functional. You look at someone like Diaz Maeda and go, he's 27. His next move's his big one. He's got a young family. He's come off the back of the most extraordinary season for him and for Celtic. This is the peak moment. It's the best thing for the club. It's the best thing for him personally. He probably even wants to go. He certainly appears to be playing that way. Therefore, you engineer that to happen. The club gets a shit ton of money. Maeda gets set up for life with his young family, and then we have time to invest in a replacement. That's a functioning football club. And to me, the same thing should have happened maybe last season with Carter Vickers, and players like Rio Hatate don't come to Celtic to win endless League Cups. They don't come to Celtic to be part of another treble. They come to put themselves in the short window. He's had a couple of Champions League campaigns, done okay. Again, he's 27 years old. This is his peak asset from the club's perspective. This is peak asset, value. You don't want him to overstay. You don't want him to start to feel unmotivated. That's what I was talking about. And we've done none of that. So we've got an aging squad. We look like we're getting back to the situation we were in 2021. In two key positions: goalkeeper and Callum McGregor. Yeah, let's talk about Callum McGregor. Right, aging, clearly declining. That's on top of the other players that are, a part of an aging squad. It's not been refreshed. You need to keep, rejuvenating squads. You can't just let it go stale like it has. And then there's a staleness to obviously to Rodgers. Rodgers has spent the summer in his own kind of verbose way battling in public because he's the only one that seemingly is mandated to speak to any of us. And clearly his words, which he sugarcoats and speaks very nicely, indicate a battle going on behind the scenes to try and get new players in, which he has lost. And it doesn't matter. I'm sitting here at 18:36 on the Monday night, and as I said to James before, between now and midnight or 11 o'clock, whatever it might be, Michael Nicholson might have found the regenerations on Championship Manager of Zidane, Iron Robin, Paolo Maldini, and bloody Paul Scholes, right? And we'll bring them into the club. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at this stage because the damage has been done. We've got young men like Adamida and Yang who look like, their next career moves, because it's clear that it's not working for them at Celtic, are being absolutely shafted because of Celtic's lack of organisation and lack of competency. The club is in an absolute mess. It appears Celtic's a small business, right? Celtic is a small business. There are only so many senior people who are authorised to do things like transfer dealing. So that means that there's a finite amount of resources doing this. Therefore, you can't leave it to the last minute, because if you spend 4 days chasing Kasper Dolberg, who has never shown any signs ever that he wants to sign for Celtic, the opportunity cost of all the time you spent on that means you're not bringing in somebody else. And just leaving everything to the last minute as well just stretches what will be a few number of key individuals just far too thin to actually be effective and efficient in the job of signing football players. If I was Brendan Rodgers, what I would like to see happen now, midnight tonight, I would like to see Brendan Rodgers resign. I think he should resign. I don't want to see him sacked. He should resign. He should say, stick the any non-disclosure agreement up your arse. He should come out, and if he wants to keep his legacy with the fans, he should tell us exactly what's been happening over the last year behind the scenes at Celtic as regards the football operations of the club. And I think if he did that and he walked away, I for one would say, well, fair dues, because actually I think it would be the best thing for Celtic as well. He's gone stale. The tactics are stale. He's got no new ideas. We're struggling badly in the same way, time after time after time in key games. The team's been found out in terms of how you set up to play Celtic to negate the way that Rodgers has played, and he shows no inclination to want to change it. So his time's gone. His time's run. Do we really want to see another 6-9 months of this? I seriously think we're going to be in 2021 territory. Other than the fact we don't have a a turbocharged opponent helped in so many different ways to kind of unless Hearts get rid of Derek McInnes, of course, and bring in somebody competent, then that might happen. They could win the league by 30 points this season. That's the only thing that's going to save Celtic this season is the kind of incompetence at other clubs at the moment. But I think Brendan Rodgers should resign. I think he should leave. I think it would be the best thing for all of us. I would sort of maintain a high degree of respect for him if he did that, and I think it would be the best thing for the club. And then you bring in somebody who's had no hand or part in anything that's gone on in the last 9 months, 12 months, who can at least inject the players, everybody with a fresh start. Everybody starts from the same bench, the same position, and at least start to inject some enthusiasm and energy into the team. And just bring a different approach to the way that we're playing. I don't see any other way of saving the season than that outcome. Which, let's face it, it's not going to happen. But at the moment, and I'm sorry, I'll shut up in a minute.
No, please keep going. You're on a roll, baby.
At the moment, everybody at that club who is in an authoritative position is acting incompetently. There are only so many. This is a small company. There are only so many people, and there's nothing that's happening today around the football operations that appears to be competent. And there are people being hurt by this because, as I say, young guys are having their lives turned upside down, going for medicals, agreeing terms, and not even being able to move because Celtic are so incompetent and can't, and have left it to the last minute, and have been, I don't know whether it's laziness or whatever it is, and haven't got these deals done. I don't see any other way out of it in the short term. I really don't, in terms of how the form's going to recover and how we're going to be playing in any coherent style with what's going to be a highly disaffected dressing room.
Yeah, I'll supplement what you said by kind of bringing it back to the game from Sunday, and just I think it was widely. It was funny seeing all of the non-spreadsheet shaggers embracing the one tweet about the lowest XG, and whether that was true or not, like I saw some back and forth about. But let's just say it was god awful, like in the teens for both teams. And we were talking, I think, 4 shots for Rangers and 5 for Celtic, or vice versa, something like that. But to me, and even larger indictment is you look at possession-based model, like something like XT. It was on the margin, but Celtic's passing actually very marginally increased the probability of Rangers scoring during the game. That doesn't happen. Like that just speaks to how ineffectual the passing was. And by the way, Rangers were barely better. They were just marginally positive. It was, and this goes back to, it wasn't just like in the final third. Neither one of these teams could do anything to progress the ball up the pitch. I mean, guys were being, I saw, and I'll cards on the table. Like I was probably on the high end on the Connor Barron signing for Rangers. I thought he's at least a decent SPFL player and, could do a job for them in some ways. And I saw him kind of being lauded by Ranger supporters. And then I looked at, and I didn't have that feeling like going through the game. I was like, my God, he's been awful on the ball. Like he can't even just do a basic, simple pass in the game. And then I looked at the data after the next day, and I'm like, yeah, it was terrible. And that was everybody, like everyone in the midfield. This was not a who won the midfield battle. They both surrendered. Like this was a mutual surrender. This was like Christmas Day in World War I when both sides just said, we're just going to sit and drink and not really fight at all here. it was that like brutal and pathetic in the ability to really do anything on the ball. And the reason why I'm getting into this is that, and to your point on no matter what happens between the time of this recording and 11 p.m. on Monday night, it's not going to be enough to address this problem. We're not revamping the entirety of the midfield. We're not, going to inject Kieran Tierney with some kind of getting younger, a youth potion where he's going to reclaim whatever's going on with him physiologically, because he does not look right to me anyway. I think a lot of people are saying that now. I mean, it's sad. I mean, I take no, enjoyment out of saying that, but that is a huge problem if he's not able to function as an attacking fullback, because then what the hell do you do with him in a back four like that? How does that play out? And to your point, and we'll get into it, Callum McGregor, we've been talking about this for literally months, that this was the season when this was probably going to happen, and that there had to be something tactical in order to try to absorb this. I don't see any of it. So what's the game plan, right? How do you adjust to some of this stuff, or do you just keep doing the exact same thing over and over? And it's not that you abandon being possession centric or attacking or positional. It's that the pieces are just not lining up. Like, it's too many square pegs, round holes. Like, at some point you have to say, well, maybe we need to get different holes. Like, this is just crazy. And so I am, to me, I agree with you. And we've talked about this again for months, the stacking of risks, and that we're in full bloom now, baby. Like, this is risk being realized. Again, as a point of recording, Ajax is in for Dolberg. He's probably off. He's not coming. We don't know about some of these other loan signings, potentially a guy in France. That one looks like he's off to somewhere else. They're scrambling now for this guy Fofana, maybe. So they'll probably end up with some guys, but these are the, who's shopping to their player to Celtic right now? They're either a crap agent or they're an a-hole player that's desperate for somewhere to go. All right. I mean, there's no forward thinking from anyone that's coming to Celtic right now either. So it's like a match made in hell, potentially. And we're going to get 2 or 3 of these guys in, and they're not going to fit whatever system that's supposedly playing. I mean, the comments that Rodgers made after the game about Balikwisha, I wanted to pull my freaking hair out. It's like, he thinks this guy's a traditional winger that's going to take fullbacks on 1v1. Like, does he know he's been playing in midfield at Antwerp? Like, is that even on his radar? So yeah, again, going back to Sunday, I think, say whatever you want about Rangers, is they're probably a higher level of talent versus Kairat, and they took us to the point where we literally couldn't progress the ball. So what does that mean? Is that anyone that's decent that basically sets up to nullify, and God help us if they can actually do something productive on the ball themselves, like we'll be facing in the Europa League. I mean, it's just really dire stuff. Unless something happens to restructure the game model or how it is we're setting up to play, and putting players in a better position to try and, not build your whole game model over having good wingers who are fast that can get in behind, and not have any of those players at your disposal. Okay, you got to do something else. So what's that going to be? So rant over for me. That's back-to-back rants. That might be unprecedented. Poor Laura. By the way, I didn't even mention Laura couldn't make it this week, so that's why you're stuck with us ranting back and forth in ping pong. She'll be back next week, but so yeah. So let's progress.
James, these things aren't going to change. These things are not going to change. We know this.
Yeah.
What is the point of moving forward on the basis that, as we sit here today, what is the point? What is going to change? What is going to improve? Rodgers has clearly been at war with the board all summer. He's asked for recruits. It's not even that he needed to say it. It was bleeding obvious, since January, what attacking replacements were needed. And now we're scrambling around being turned down in the last sort of few hours of the transfer window, when we've had months, literally months, to plan replacements in key positions that we knew we needed to fill. So Rodgers has been very public about that. The players in the dressing room will have heard that. Even Callum McGregor, who, and I think Chris Sutton articulated it very well. Callum McGregor is not somebody that's going to come out
No, you're
and give
absolutely right.
ill-considered sound bites about any subject. He thinks about what the impact will be on Celtic first, second, and third before he even thinks about how he's going to make him look. So for him to say we need help as a squad means that it's bloody obvious in the dressing room that everybody feels the same way about that. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said that. So the players and the manager are at one. So now everyone's got an excuse to be miserable and not perform at their best. And by the way, the key feature for me in the three games, the two against Kyra and the Derby, is the lack of performance from any of the senior players. That
Yeah.
is very, very worrying indeed. I mean, Liam Scales, bless him, it was a game made for Liam, shelling balls into the box. Liam's heading them away. He's brilliant at that, and he did excellent on the day. That's his game. So I'm excluding him from that. And he's a senior player now, by the way. He was captain for a bit in the last game, and he's 27 now, 26, 27. So he's a senior pro as well. But in general, the senior pros just haven't performed. And, it's all indicative of a malaise, of a depression, of a gloom, of an ennui, of apathy, whatever you want to call it, that's settled over the whole club. That it needs a spark. It needs a jolt. And as I say, the only one I could think of, the least disruptive change that I can see, is for Rodgers to do the honourable thing and say, "Well, I told you what I needed. You didn't give it me. I'm walking away." Right, and that's the only thing I can think is going to potentially save the season from just being this lethargic, slow, ponderous, lacking in energy football that we've seen, and I'm going to continue to see, with no respect or humbleness to change approach based on the opposition, which probably get away with in many SPFL games. In that EPL, in that Europa League group, there's going to be some nasty shocks. I tell you that, some horrible games that we'll be watching through our fingers. So it needs something. It needs a jolt. That does address the issues. It doesn't address the incompetence of the senior people at the club. It doesn't address the fact that all those senior people feel authorised to be incompetent, because as long as they're answering to one man, and that man is satisfied with their performance on that basis, they can do no wrong. That's just it's just dysfunctional for a public company to operate in that way. As we've said many times, none of that solves any of that. I'm just tactically trying to think of how do we save this season from just being more of these dreadful, turgid, dire performances.
Yeah, and that's the
What would you do? What would you do? Have you got a better idea?
No, I think what has to happen is somebody is going to have to set up the team to try and optimize what is going to be there. And I am convinced it's not what we've been doing for 5 seasons now, 4+ seasons since Ange arrived. Where the game model has evolved a little bit, but generally been very similar. We do not have the people to run it anymore. It cannot be the way. So that needs to, I'm not saying necessarily revolutionary changes, but we need more players put in positions that they can at least function and do their job, and get rid of all these toxic combinations. I mean, we basically have one big toxic combination from front to back at this point. If teams set up the proper way, that we are completely ineffectual. So whether that's Rodgers leaving and someone coming in to do that, or somehow he, maybe he's been betting that this would all happen. Because again, I the only reason I held out some hope there, and I'm not calling it rational hope, believe me, it might be a wing and a prayer, is that because he had some history of not being an ideologue. So that's what we've talked about this over and over since his return, is that it's almost been shocking the degree with which we haven't really done anything. How few times we've gone to a back three. We haven't seen a 4-4-2 diamond, I think, the whole time he's been back, right? I mean, he used to, in his first tenure at Leicester, he would do a lot of that kind of tweaking at times. So I'm not saying like
We've
wholesale.
got the players to do
I,
that. We've got the players to do that
well,
now. Yeah.
well, that's right. That's what's crazy. It's like I'm not. None of these are going to be perfect. There is no perfect now. It's the the least bad option of coming up with a solution that's going to have fewer of your guys look like asses because you're putting them in bad. But putting Nygren at right wing out wide in perpetuity. If that's what it takes, because the other 9 outfield players are then put in a better position and the overall system is going to be more resilient and productive, then you swallow it and you stick Nygren out to dry, so to speak, knowing that that's kind of a cost of doing business, so to speak, in order to transition into whatever that hypothetical thing would be. But what you can't do is have, Nygren out right, Balakwisha out left, neither guy really being a traditional winger in a traditional winger system. Maeda dropping in as a hold-up striker from 2 center backs who are not advanced ball players, and Carter Vickers seems to have progressed for whatever reason. And you got Tony Ralston, and then who knows what's going on with Kieran Tierney. I mean, there's so many layers of just stuff going on here. And Schmeichel, again, on another one. It's just, is Schmeichel cooked? Like we've got a number of things here, and to keep persisting with and McGregor, I mean, it's just like crazy. It's crazy town to keep doing that. So I don't know. Maybe if the window closes and for his own reasons, Rodgers doesn't want to leave, and I would actually understand that because of what happened last time, and he wouldn't want to go against his pledge as a result of that. Maybe he can conjure up, tap into that well that's still there and say, okay, it's time to get down to business. I'm going to make the best of my last 6 months, knowing that I'm not going to get any help. I'm not even going to think, forget about January. I'm not playing that game, and just say that I'm going to show that I can, win this league with this mess that they've given me, and do his best job. Like that's probably because even if the idea that this mess is going to go out and hire a new manager on a permanent basis, but even on an interim basis, that's going to come in and, number one, be good enough, and number two, be willing and given the rope in order to put the kind of changes in that might be required. I think that's fraught with risk too. And that's, we always talk about once this level of chaos, so to speak, is reached, risk emerges from all kinds of places. So,
No, I mean, I'd hope that too, but I'd only be hoping. Is what I'm saying, because I just don't see any
That's
evidence.
Exactly. It's hope everywhere.
That we are. I mean, we could sit here, I think, and make a case. We could sit and construct a team that could play like a 3-5-2. I think that might solve some of the Tierney issues. Sit him on the left of a back three, and he's not having to run up and down all day. He's just going to be that kind of ball playing, slightly more athletic player at the back. It's almost like your insurance policy. I think it means we only have 2 players out wide. We don't really have anyone who's great in the wide position, so we limit that. And we can probably get a configuration of the midfielders that we've got that would be functional in a 3. We could probably protect Callum McGregor as well, just by packing those numbers in the midfield, and it would probably help us against these mid blocks, because we'd have more like having some numbers in there to play through. I can also make a case for a 4-4-2 diamond, absolutely, because I think you've got like Balakwisha, Nygren that could sit behind a striker, perhaps. So you almost have rather than 2 strikers, you have a single striker and a double 10. And again, you could construct a midfield out of where even players like Engels would have utility. Engels is an inside right midfielder whose job it is to shuttle up and down and get balls through to those 3. I think is probably good. And don't ask him to be pushing right up and playing with his back to goal on the edge of the box and linking play. That's going to get the best out of him, for example. But I mean, I'm thinking radical thoughts here. I put in our chat at half time, and I wasn't even joking, that is there actually any harm in taking off, Ralston, putting young Donovan on, putting Murray in, for Carter Vickers, putting Bernardo in for McGregor, putting Yamada in for Ida, just having an injection of youthful enthusiasm, at least, to get everybody going, because it's so flat. It's so turgid. It's so uninspiring. Nobody looks like they really care anymore. And when you're crying out for help, and those above you are steadfast in refusing to bend and to help you, maybe you start to down tools and think, well, you don't care. Why should I? And I honestly think that's where we've got to. And as I said, I don't see an easy way out of that without a radical change. And I take your point that just introduces more risk. But what's the risk of doing nothing? I don't think
Yeah.
do nothing. I don't think do nothing is an acceptable way forward from where we sit today.
Yeah. No, and I take your point. And even if Rodgers gets into his tactical lab and comes up with a different game model, so to speak, it may just already be too stale. There may not, particularly if this last minute train wreck that might be unfolding in the window, if players that won away end up having to be forced to stay, throw that into the mixer too. I mean, it's.
Yes, it looks like that's going to happen, and that's just. And we've seen this before, and it's horrible. It's horrible for the players. It's horrible for the squad. It's horrible for the manager, and the fans see it manifest in, again, a flat, insipid, uninspired set of performances. We've seen this before.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's boy. Well, let's pivot a little bit then, and we'll keep it pretty short. We'll be back later in a week because again, we don't want to belabor specifics on the transfer window because we don't have them yet. But we'll be back for the extra time show later in the week for subscribers. But so how do you think it's going to play out? Like, if I put a gun to your head, we'll put each other on the line here so we can look like total asses in 24 hours by the time this goes out and everyone sees how it closed. What's your best guess?
This is our hazards. This is our hazards of recording in the time that we are.
Okay, here we go. Breaking news.
Breaking news as we sit here is that Adamida has signed for Swansea, and I am so happy for him. I just think
am I.
It's the best thing. It's the best thing for him as a footballer, as a young man. I don't think playing for Celtic suited him. The pressure was clearly unbearable for him. It wasn't going well, and I wish him all the best, really, all the luck in the world, and all the good play in the world at Swansea. So and hopefully that also means that we've kind of got some other striking options over the line as well, albeit it's probably going to be on a loan basis. But yeah, as we sit here, the Yang to Birmingham one was being reported as to have collapsed, which again, I think the young guy could probably do with a fresh start somewhere else, where he's going to be more appreciated probably.
Yeah,
but yeah. Sorry. So your question, James, please. I kind of got distracted.
Well, no, just given that breaking news. I mean, I mean, we're even if the guy from Sweden comes in, the left winger. I mean, we're still short at least 3 forwards, I would say, to be where we would probably kind of want to be, and that's even if they were ideally profiled, which I'm like, that ain't happening at this point. So, I mean, I think that would be the minimus. So, but what do you? I mean, what's your best guess? I mean, do you think we'll get 2 more in? Would you?
I've got no faith that we'll get any in, and in all honesty, and again, I'm just basing it on performance. If you leave deals to the last minute, there's so many things that can go wrong, and once it goes wrong, you've got left yourself no time to get around that. And as I say, if your key people are engaged in that particular negotiation, I'm sure they're multitasking. But we don't have an army of lawyers doing this stuff, right? It's a small business. It's only so many people, as I keep saying. So we're just it's our own fault. It's self-inflicted, and we're going to run out of time. So, like you say, the idea that we'll get somebody that's a perfect fit and a perfect profile, even though we should have profiles of up to 10 players, ready to go, locked, loaded. We should have known from their agents what their demands will be. We should known from their agents what the club's likely to ask for. We should know a lot about their personality. We should know everything about their playing profile, and it should be just a case of going through the list and getting the negotiations done. All those things should be known. We should know what the answers are likely to be when we ask the question, because we have the market knowledge. I'm saying this as if that's what that is how it should be. I don't know if that is how it is. I mean, Celtic seem to be becoming a laughing stock in the market and in the industry in terms of their inability to treat people, respectfully and to do deals in a good faith way, and that's really sad to see.
Yeah,
So to answer your question, I've got no faith any deals will get done.
yeah, and that's the alarming part of that is, I mean, there's so many alarming aspects of it, but the probably the consistent theme that you and I have been talking about for the longest is the problems in midfield, and there's not even a hint of that being addressed once again. I mean, so I don't know.
Yeah, but other issues have stacked on top of
Right.
that one. That's now down here somewhere.
Yeah, which is the crazy part. I mean,
It's not gone away. It's just down here.
yeah, and festered maybe worse because of McGregor's decline and maybe Hatate might not being the most motivated person in the world, understandably. Um, again, if he's wanting away and has wanted away for quite some time. Well, let's touch on this then. We'll wrap up because this is another 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is the captain. I don't think anyone would point out that or try to make the case that he had some superlative performance against Rangers. I've been one of his big defenders and fans over the years. But I mean, where do you think we're at with Callum McGregor, and is it as big of a problem as some people are? I think declaring as he's one of the major problems. I think I'm reading more and more. Do you think it's that bad, or do you think it's maybe some misattribution based off of him, understandably because he's the captain, catching more than maybe he should?
Yeah, I think it's never just as straightforward as saying, "Oh, it's age decline and there's nothing else going on here." I mean, clearly, the team is not functioning well, and that makes every player look worse than what they actually are. So that we have to take that into account. Is he off form, or is it part of a longer issue? I mean, every year I will do an article on Callum McGregor, and I'll dust down all my charts, and I will show you this gradual decline in virtually every metric apart from scoring goals, and massively over exceeding your XG, by the way, and say, well, yeah, he's declining, but I think we're still all right. It's still his level today, even though it's not the same as it was here 5 years ago. It's still pretty good. It's still functional, and it still would cost us a fortune to replace it in the marketplace. So net, we're okay. At some point, you're going to reach a point where it's like, yeah, it's probably not good enough anymore. And I don't know if that's the season, because I don't know if he's suffering because the team is dysfunctional, or whether he's actually an intrinsic part of the problem. I think it's so difficult at the moment to kind of dissect wood from trees in that respect, because of the number of issues we have with performance, and the number of concerns we have over individuals. Is that can we attribute it to McGregor individually declining, or is it the fact that he's just suffering? He's suffering the same as everybody else is. I don't honestly don't know the answer to that question, James. I mean, we need to, but clearly he's not being the sort of the shining light that's holding things together. He's suffering as much as anyone else, and therefore, isn't capable of single-handedly grabbing the team by the scruff of the neck and dragging them over the line in these key games. His game seems to have gone on the slide as much as everybody else's, which is probably an indication that he just simply doesn't have the energy these days to take that game by the scruff of the neck and say, right, I know we're all playing crap, and I know that the system's shit, but I'm gonna do my bit, and I'm gonna drive the team forward and do whatever the hell I can. If he's not doing that, I suspect he probably can't anymore.
Yeah, I'm as I said, I've been a huge defender of his, and I celebrate the widespread embrace of the existence of aging curves. So that is a leap forward compared to 5 years ago, when I was on my warpath against Scott Brown, as some people would say at the time. But I also think that that's not a fair analog for McGregor, both good and bad. The Why it's a bad analog is because Brown was 36 that season. McGregor's only 32. And when you're talking about aging curves, that's a huge difference. Like that's the meat of the curve for particularly for outfield players and particularly for midfielders. So I don't think that's fair, but I think it is fair because, and we talked about it, it seems like years ago, it was years ago now, was that Brown had this very kind of unusual career path where he maybe wasn't the, ideal 24/7 professional for a part of his 20s, and then had this rejuvenation when Rodgers arrived. So he had had a lot of injuries in and out of the team. So he didn't have as many miles as you might think in his late 20s. When I say miles, minutes played, where he had that burst, to his credit, when he kind of professionalized and Rodgers came in. He had that 2-year period. There's 2 seasons where he was like legit, I think, physically, like on the top of his game, maybe at the best level of his career from a holistically. At least in midfield. I mean, when he was playing on the wings and stuff, when he was in his early 20s, obviously not the case, but Gregor has a lot of mileage. He's just been flogged for so long, and he's been the consummate 24/7 professional, so he doesn't have that kind of off ramp to boost. So he's retired from international duty. That may have helped on the margins a little bit, but he's only human, and I think the idea that he was going to be a midfielder that's going to cover a massive amount of ground, and when you've got a complete tactical mess in front of him, he's never been. This is why I've been on my rampage this season about Inamura, is that McGregor has never been the type of midfielder that's going to pick out a pass with consistency and break lines in front of him.
So here's the tell. I think here's the tell. You're right. He was never been that player that goes, "I'm going to change the game by playing a killer ball." The thing that he used to do is he'd get the ball and he would carry it and he would drive at the opposition, and he would pull players out of position and he'd create space and create a bit of chaos by simply running with the ball. Have you seen him do that in the last 3 games?
Yeah, no. That to
me, that's the tell. That's the tell. Yep. I think,
and that is a direct physical decline type of thing. So when you lose that fraction of a percent or percent in your quickness and pace, that can easily become the place where it would be seen. And you're right, I 100% agree with that. But his deficiency in passing, then, in being a line breaker, that again, it's about putting him in a position where he's going to succeed, yes or no. Everyone's frustrated, including me, about the sideways and the backward passing. Well, when there's no one open in front of him, when there's no one making themselves available, when people are pissed off and annoyed and maybe not as motivated and moving as much as they should be or could be, and they're being man-marked by reasonably athletic defenders, that's all part of the mess. And you're putting him in a position where he's got to cover copious amounts of space in transition. He's not going to look good. So again, how do you address that and to put him in a position where he's going to be more insulated and beneficial? It's not moving him forward.
Yeah. So here's we've been very ranty today, and we're a bit low on numbers and stats. So based on the matches so far, this doesn't include the game from the weekend, right? If I say to you that the player with the highest number of ball carries, and the way I carry it, the way I count ball carries, by the way, is it's a sum of 2 things. It's the pack dribble. So if you've taken the ball forward and you've beaten a player, as in you've taken somebody out of the game by running with the ball, that also gets counted as a ball carry. And the second part of that sum is if you carry the ball with your feet for at least 10 yards in the opposition half, well, that's a progressive run. That gets added to the pack dribbles, and the total is total ball carries. Okay, so the player with the highest number of average ball carries is. You want to guess?
God, Liam Scales would be my guess.
Actually, it's Yang.
Yang. Wow. Yeah. Oh, that's his superpower. Okay, so yeah.
It is. Yep. It is 6.67 a game. McGregor this season, and this is again before the weekend, 0.7. 0.7 carries, ball carries per game.
Yeah.
So that's almost disappeared from his game this season.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So whether that's a focus issue, a functional issue, or he just feels like he can't do it physically anymore, that has to change. Or the operating environment, the game model to free him up to do that. Like something has to go there, because then otherwise, if it's just him, I don't think, particularly in a single pivot, and I know, the inverted fullbacks and it's dynamic and it's fluid, but he's been mostly by himself a lot of the time this season. And if he's not carrying it forward and he's not breaking lines with his passing, which was never his strength, and he's not going to be able to cover the ground defensively, then what the hell's he doing there? And that's as sad as it is to ask that question, because it doesn't make me feel good to ask it. And again, that's putting someone in a position to fail in my mind. So that's the job of the manager, is that you got to make a switch. You can't, and this was, again, ultimately what I would say about Brown is you're leaving him there to basically, flounder and hurt the team. That's not good for anybody. And, pride and all these other things. Yeah.
Sorry, Bernardo in his limited minutes, tiny sample data, 3.8 ball carries compared to 0.7.
I was going to say, in prior seasons, it's probably, quadruple or quintuple. He would be in the mid-single digits, McGregor, I would think, historically, when he was, like the first Ange season. I can imagine he was probably at 3 or 4 or 5 a game. So yeah, hugely problematic. So again, yeah, we're not being Pollyannish on McGregor, but again, this comes down to the issue of add it to the list, baby. and the idea, that that's going to be a priority right now when we can't even get a winger signed is just. So this is about triage and hopefully moving forward for the rest of the season, and fighting off Derek McInnes and his title challenge with Lawrence Shanklin leading the way with the flag. So
we'll maybe get into that. How bad does Celtic need to be? And by the way, the work I've done with some of the stats bomb data shows that Celtic's attack is functioning less effectively than it did in 2021, right? In terms of volume of chances created, XG per game, XG difference, and all that. We are in a worse place than we were in 2021. The only thing that's saving us is that our defence, believe it or not, is it's maintaining last season's standards, actually. And so that's why there's hope. If we can just configure something, and let's wrap this up with a positive. Defensively, I think we're generally okay. It's if we can configure the front line to just improve a notch. And I think one of the things we'll talk about on Thursday is how much better does Celtic need to be just to keep ahead of this year's pack, based on what we've seen at the Delaware Rangers, what we've seen at Analytics FC, etc. And Hibs. Hey, listen, let's not forget Hibs. Hibs are probably arguably the most consistent performing team in Scotland over the last 9 months, right? Maybe. Yeah. So let's count them. So yeah, let's end on a positive.
All right. Well, as always, we appreciate you hanging in there with us. We know this is a trying time for all of us as we get through. What do we have now, Alan? It's less than 4 hours left before the window.
3 hours and 45 minutes. And by the way, James, Celtic will sign 8 players between now and the next 3 and 3/4 hours. We'll look like idiots tomorrow when this podcast comes.
What else?
So that's good. At least everyone will be able to unite and enjoy, and
just another week at the Huddle Breakdown. So yes, thanks for everyone joining us. Laura will be back next week, and again, for our subscribers, we'll be around on Thursday to really have a deep dive into what happened at the end of the transfer window as we look ahead to the rest of the season. So hail, and we'll talk to you next week.